And I would encourage you guys, if you do have issues with your athletic trainers, to me, besides my head coaches, that's the strongest relationship I need to have on staff, is with them. So 2 people that have done a great job. If you ever get a chance to go to College Park and visit with Megan Rogers, she's actually a physical therapist. So again, a lot of the things that we do, that I do now, came from her and what she taught me at Maryland in terms of athletics, in terms of screening the athletes, in terms of injury prevention, return to play. All those protocols she's put into place, not only with women's basketball program, but she now oversees the entire athletic department and all their return to play. She's done such a fantastic job. And last but not least, our athletes. We can moan and groan about them at times, but you know, they're why we do this. And in a couple of slides, you'll laugh a little bit, I hope, with some of the experiences that we shared with these guys. And you know, my background, you probably picked up on it a little bit from the last slide, but 3 years at South Carolina, 3 years at University of Maryland, and a year at Virginia, all with basketball. So the last 7 years, focusing all of my energy and time on basketball, and mostly on women's basketball. At Virginia and Maryland, I spent time with the men, but for the most part, I've been focused on women's basketball for the last 7 years. Boston Racquet Club was a year I spent as a personal trainer. It really helped me change my lens and how I view movement, how I view training. And I didn't have All-Americans. I had 65-year-old, you know, almost going to retire, just want to be able to ride my bike on the weekends. I had dads that just wanted to play with their kids. I had women that wanted to lose 40 pounds. So kind of changed how I viewed training. And of course, Iowa State with Mo, and then I was an intern at Athletes Performance back in undergrad in the dark ages. All right, let's see if we can get this technology to work. This is a clip, and I'm going to show it to you guys because of where we are today, and I'll follow up after you watch it. Hey, Greg, Gary, can you get that to play? It's not going to play. Play it. I'll tell you what to Google. You can Google the link, and then we'll all watch it later. Oh.
How do I reach these kids? 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 How do I reach these kids?
Perfect. So we've all been there before, right? And I wanted to show you guys that clip because in 2017, the team I was working with at South Carolina had a great season. They had won the SEC regular season, they had gone through, won the SEC tournament, received a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament, and they were in the West region, so that region was in Stockton, California. That team won the first 2 games at home, okay, advanced to Stockton, to the Sweet 16, and we win the next 2 games. And the plan was we're going to go right from Stockton to Dallas, here, for the Final Four. So it was going to be about a 12-day swing. We started counting out the days, but it just made more sense than to fly all the way back to Columbia, then come back to Dallas. So we're here in Dallas, and for those of you guys that work with basketball teams, March can be one of the most exciting and exhausting months that you'll ever train a team. Throw all your training loads out the door. There's things you can't control in March from a media perspective, from having these guys play on the biggest stage, so much on the line, so much pressure. When we got to that point, when we got to the Final Four, and you can see it when you watch Final Four games, that first half of that first game is the teams are kind of feeling each other out, but they're both really tired. It's some bad basketball. And that's the position we found ourselves in the first half of that Final Four against Stanford. Just sluggish, and we look bad, and everyone's kind of looking around. we don't know what to do. On both ends, Stanford and us, we both look bad. So we come in at halftime, and it wasn't the team that had won the SEC regular season. It wasn't the team that had won the SEC tournament. They had no bite to them, nothing. So, and mind you, this is a team full of, on that team, eventually it's going to be a number 1 draft pick, a number 2 draft pick. This team is stacked, not playing very well. And walk into the locker room, body language is bad, heads are hanging down, and nobody's saying anything. In walks Coach Staley, and she's an incredible coach, and she's not a real rah-rah coach at halftime. She's very, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to fix it. And you can tell she knows something isn't right either, so she stands up in front of them and she just asks them, what's going on, guys? Quiet, nobody saying anything, and then you see a hand go up. And it's one of our juniors. So Dawn was like, okay, Kayla? And she said, Coach, we're millennials. And everybody in the room lost it. Just started laughing. You could just feel the pressure just went out the room. The entire place busted up, from support staff to players to coaches. Even our equipment manager was like on the ground, dying, laughing so hard. And at that moment, we knew that she was right. Like, they're millennials. Like, how is Coach going to get through to these guys? Just like that South Park clip. And at that moment, she reached the kids, and you saw it at the end of the game. Like, they ended up winning that game against Stanford. They go on, still tired, still exhausted, and that was the final product. So, I was thinking about this the other day because my brother's a high school coach and teacher, and I coach. And my brother-in-law, he works at a medical school. He's a medical professor, and we were all sitting around the fire a couple weeks ago talking about millennials and what a pain in the ass they are. For X reason, Y reason, Z reason, and then you get into conversation with strength coach friends. How are you dealing with these guys? Like, what are you doing? But if you can reach them, it is one of the most rewarding, it's one of the greatest things, the greatest feelings is to be able to see those guys, up on a podium, confetti coming, celebrating, because you had the opportunity to reach them, but how? So I want to talk about some things today with these freshmen, these millennial freshmen coming in, and I'm sure it's probably going to change to a new generation, next year, so we're not even going to be able to call them millennials anymore, but talk about some of those things. I want to get conversations going about what you guys do, to work with this population. So today we're going to talk about our plan to get through to these guys, which is sometimes what coach's plan is. We're going to run. That's what I hear a lot. That isn't necessarily my plan, but that's what we're going to hear if you come to South Carolina to practice. She wants them to work. Then you got Asia's plan. That's her plan. She's a millennial. She wants to secure the bag. So as a strength and conditioning coach, I know what both of those people want. Okay? Coach wants them to work hard. Okay? Asia wants to secure the bag. So as a strength coach, how can I put a plan together, okay, to help both of those guys out? So what we're going to talk about and how I can make that plan. I want to talk about the evolution of the game. This will just be a short bit on the women's basketball game and where it's come from and where it's going. I want to talk about KYP, which is know your personnel. I think that's very important. That term comes from some film sessions. When you're going over other teams, they say it's the players. I think about it myself as a coach, is I need to know these guys if I'm going to give them, the best experience training. I need to know about Dawn's style of play. Just like when I was at Maryland, I needed to know about Brenda's style of play. When I was at Virginia, I need to know about Joanne's style of play. That's going to dictate some of the things I do with them, some of the ways I help prepare them for what they're going to see when they get into practice. The demands of the game. This is important. As you guys know, whatever sport you're working with, you need to make sure you prepare them for what they're going to see on the floor. And we'll talk about basketball players, what they need, women's basketball players, get a little bit more specific. If, do they really need something different than a men's basketball player? We'll talk about that. And also the schedule, the schedule for basketball and where it's going, and and how else that they're going to screw up summer training by adding more basketball. And what else? At the end, we'll leave it open for some questions, and we can talk at the end if you guys have anything else you want to add. So let's get this rolling. Women's basketball, where it is, where it's come from, where it's going. It's a really exciting time to be a part of women's basketball. So if you're working with a basketball team, right now you have the highest participation rate in basketball at the youth level, okay, coming up. So there's a lot of good athletes coming into women's basketball right now. Attendance at women's basketball games is at an all-time high at the college level. All right, so we're now playing in arenas that are sold out, okay? That is becoming a more and more common occurrence in the women's game. And viewership for the NCAA tournament is also at an all-time high. The 2017 Final Four in Dallas, most streamed women's championship game ever. Okay, so what does this mean for the strength and conditioning professional? More resources, okay? There are now more strength coaches just dedicated to women's basketball, which is great because the training's getting better, the weight rooms are getting better, the athletes are getting better, so guess what? The game is getting better. And I think if you guys are working with a women's team, you need to know that, okay? Because you need to know your value. You are a valuable asset to your team, okay? You're a valuable asset to your coaching staff, and when you go in and you have meetings with your teams and you have meetings with administration, they need to know this stuff, okay? And you guys need to get conversations going about what your value is, okay? So I need to know what everyone else is doing, so when I go into conversations, you know, and you might be uncomfortable talking about when I go into conversations about salary, okay? When I go into conversations about incentive bonuses, okay, for postseason wins and performance, I need to know these things so I can have some talking points with these guys, okay? So make sure that, I hope that you guys feel if you work with women's teams, women's basketball teams, that you're important and that where the game has come from and where it's going, it's a really exciting time to be a part of women's basketball. So give yourself a pat on the back real quick, okay? Moving on to know your personnel. So I got to know my personnel from a sports medicine standpoint. And when we talk about our freshmen and when they're getting on campus, all of these people, not just me, are going to play a critical role in their career at South Carolina. And that includes our athletic trainer, that includes our orthopedic surgeon in the upper right-hand corner, Jeff Guy, that includes our general medicine doctor, Dr. Tinley Murphy. She's so important to our team, she sits on the bench during games. That's how invested she is in the program. We need our kids around that. We need them to be comfortable talking with her about things that are happening. Same things with Michael Coseo. He's our nutritionist. You know, these are all people that I want our athletes around from day one because they make my job easier. Okay? And we'll talk about some things when we get into the screening process. All these guys need to be involved. Okay? Sharing information, making sure we're all on the same page, talking about things, pulling them all in, and using their knowledge to help the training process. And then it comes to the players. So this is how I do it. I start relationship building right when they get on campus. They haven't even committed to USC in a recruiting meeting. In their official visits, I meet with them for an hour. I have a presentation I take them through. I want them to see and feel and know what they're going to experience when they get on campus with me. I don't want them to have any doubt. You know, I want them to videos, you know, all the multimedia I can put at them so they can see it. You know, we can talk about training. I could give them a presentation like this with a bunch of words, and it just goes, we talk about millennials, it just goes, they're zoned out. But if I can get something in front of them, okay, where they can see Asia Wilson training, and they can see Asia Wilson's transformation from her freshman year to her senior year, and they can see the plan that I have in place for them, and I can talk about it, I can make it personal, I can get information about them, whether they've had an injury in high school, and we can talk about some things we're going to do, and I can show them, this is the plan for you, this is personalized. I think it helps, guys. I think it helps in their potentially in their decision-making process. But I think it definitely helps when they do decide to come to your school and they do get on campus, that they are comfortable with you and they know you and they trust you. Okay? Day one, when they get on campus as freshmen, okay, it might be one of the most important days that you have with them because that's when you're going to get a lot of information from them. I don't train them on that first day. Instead, I sit down and I talk with them on that first day, and I write page after page of notes on these guys. And we'll show you in the next slide one of the documents I use to collect these notes, but I want to make sure that I know those guys inside and out. All right? That first year of training, again, it's going to be a critical time for those guys, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about some things we're trying to expose them to prepare them for the, things we want to do down the road. And all of it is kind of dictated by what you see on that first day. And then continue with meeting with these guys. In basketball, we spend so much time with them. And, it says we have yearly meetings, but with a lot of these guys, it's daily. We're seeing them at breakfast. We're seeing them before practice. We're seeing them in the athletic training room. We're seeing them during practice, after practice. Traveling to the game. We're not even talking about training sessions yet. Also seeing them at training sessions. So if you have to, though, if you're working with a team that you can't be with them all the time like we are in basketball, set up meetings with them. Very simple. Meet with them before summer training. Meet with them before preseason. Meet with them, throughout conference play, just to make sure that you're not missing anything. Because, my personal goal is I want to learn as much about them as possible and take notes. I have folders on these guys. Like, it is crazy the amount of stuff that you can track on them and learn about them. And they do appreciate it, and they also, you can bring them in when they're seniors and look, hey, this is whenever you're being a butthead when you're a freshman. Here's that day. You remember that day? And you pull out your notes and, you can give it to them as a little graduation gift. So this is a document that I use as part of our, I guess you call it I call it our intake. Some people call it a screen. It's just a way to get a little bit more information on them. Some of the stuff is pretty simple, like height, weight, wingspan, hand size. We'll talk about leg dominance, hand dominance. They'll meet with Michael, the nutritionist. He'll do intake on them. He'll get their body fat. He'll put them in the bod pod. He'll continue to use that as a reference point for them. And again, another way to create a talking point with them. Sports med, they'll do blood work with them. They'll do more involved joint screening. I try to stay away from that. I let them do that, but I do use the information they give me. And they'll continue to go back to that as well. Some things that I've found helpful to ask them, injury history. A really simple question. Sometimes you got to dig a little bit because they forgot that they, broke both their wrists at the same time when they were in 8th grade. That's just kind of, forgot about that one. So you got to dig a little bit, but again, it gets talking points and it helps me create a better profile for them. And when I'm looking at their training program, some exercise selection, I might want to plug in this or that based on some of the things that they've seen in the past. In injury history, the second piece to that is family injury history. What we're seeing now is, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. So if, dad had, bilateral knee surgery, chances are his daughter might have some issues with her knees as well. So that's another question we take in. Just with parents and brothers and sisters, we ask that. And some of them are clean and some of them are, they got some good insurance coverage in that family. But then we'll take them through a little bit more movement. It's just pieces of the FMS. I call it the remix. From a scoring piece, we don't really score it. I just want to see them go through it, and I make notes about it. And I can do that because we have 12 athletes, so I can continue to use that. Again, a good thing to have. It's a good baseline. You can always go back to these movements in case the kid goes down, gets hurt, in case the kid, goes through a training cycle. You can go back and look at improvement, those types of things. We'll do posture pictures, you know, to me that could be one of the most valuable things that we do with these guys, especially as you're seeing some trends posturally. And then we'll do a little bit of performance assessment. I asked them too, sports played before college, asked them too, what are some of their goals? What's the goal of 1, summer training, 2, 4 years from now, and you know, where they see themselves. And some of the answers you'll get out of all of our players, 9 out of 10 of them want to be pro athletes. So to know that going into training, they need to know that I'm going to help prepare them to be a pro. And they need to know that some of the things I'm going to ask them to do are because they want to be a pro, right? So that's a big part of our training program as well. Here's some information we've gathered from our freshmen coming in. So out of the 7 years coaching, this is 20 true freshmen. And just some information gathered, you know, training history, you know, what they've been exposed to before coming to college. As you can see, and I'll put the numbers up on the next slide, not a lot of strength and conditioning exposure at the high school level with these guys. A couple of them had strength coaches. I had one that came from a national team, was really prepared. But for the most part, PE classes is their training history, which if you've been to high school PE, it's not really a good training history. Other sports played. Most of our kids specialize. Again, I'll give you the numbers on the next slide, but most of our kids are basketball players from the time they get to 6th grade up until when they graduate. No other sport is played. You can take that for what you want, but what I think about that is more from a psychological standpoint. Our kids haven't been exposed to different coaching styles. They haven't been exposed to other sports, so when basketball doesn't go right, they don't really have coping mechanisms because that's all they know. And that's all they've known since 6th grade. And they've all played it at a very high level, they've all had a lot of success, and then they get to college and sometimes things don't go that way. Injury history. So to me, this is some pretty staggering information. As you can see, we've had shoulder subluxations, stress reactions, stress fractures, stress reactions, ACLs, FAIs, Liz Frank, ACL. Just a gamut of, there's the double broken arm at the same time. That was a fun one. So a lot of baggage coming in, which, you know, again, can affect what I'm trying to do with these guys. And then eventually, you know, they're going to transfer. So here's the numbers. Previous training history, 6 out of 20 have had a previous training history. 13 out of 20 have been hurt. And you know, injury, you saw it on the last sheet, it's not subtle injuries, they're pretty significant. 6 out of 20 were multi-sport athletes. 8 out of 20 are going to leave you. So, see ya. Yeah, that's how I feel too. I don't know if you guys feel like that, but it's a problem. Kids are leaving left and right. You're having, you know, again, I know we're talking about first-year kids, but all these things are applicable. I've had a transfer every year for the past 4 seasons that's had to sit out because they transferred. So, you know, we can cry about it, but my programs have actually benefited from it, but, you know, it is sad. So what are the limitations of these freshmen coming in? As we spoke about, unresolved previous injuries, okay? That is why, in my opinion, it's so important to have that sports medicine staff on your side, because we're having kids come in that aren't 100%. We're having kids come in that aren't even 50%. I've had 2 kids that didn't even play their senior year of high school because of injury. One of them came in a wheelchair, day 1, okay? So that can cause some issues down the road if you don't take care of it from day 1. Limited training experience, they aren't prepared for college basketball. And how it's structured now, coming in that first year as freshmen, they'll be thrust into practices 2 hours a week. They aren't ready for that. Their bodies are not prepared. I call it intensity deficit disorder. I think this is probably a byproduct from not having any training in a weight room setting before they get to college. they're not comfortable with intensity. They don't understand it. It doesn't feel right. And my solution is the weight room. So I think the quicker we can get them into the weight room, the better. Early specialization, like I spoke about, these guys, they don't know anything else but basketball. They haven't taken a break. They play 11 months out of the year in high school and AAU. When they get to us, they've just been going. So when things don't go right, they don't know what to do. They can't handle it. So if you guys do have sports psychologists, I think that could be another great addition to your screening process. Phone addicts. Man, and I know some of us in the room probably are addicted to our phone as well, but this is causing some issues as well from a physical standpoint. When you think about from a posture, I mean, a lot of our kids that we train in the basketball world, they're taller than most people. So their world is down and in front. The phone just adds to that problem. Down and in front, and you can tell from a an athletic standpoint, this is not the position that we want our kids in. So we've had to actually add exercises in to help address posture, alignment, some different things. And I'm not gonna talk too much on that today, but if you guys want to talk about that after, some things that you might be doing, I would love to get into that. And again, psychological issues. 18 to 22-year-olds are now listed as the loneliest age group. The loneliest age group, 18 to 22. They live in these spaces, like 2 miles by 2 miles. They're called college campuses, with like 30,000 18 to 22-year-olds. And they're the loneliest age group. It is staggering. Why? Anybody? Social media, right? They project these things onto social media. They're constantly getting hit back with things. And they're the loneliest age group. Okay, these are the guys that we're training. We need to know these things when we're getting into training programs with them. Nutrition education. Horrible. Coming in. They don't know anything. Another fun question, if you want to add it to your questionnaire, I didn't put it up there today, is name a vegetable. And you will be, I'm blown away. I got kids that, potato chip. That's the vegetable they know. So again, when you go back to your personnel, you're getting to know your guys. Knowing who you work with is important. The better I know Michael, my nutritionist, okay, the better my relationship is with him, the better his relationship is with the athletes. Oh, Katie's cool with Michael? Michael's cool? Oh, yeah. Oh, Katie, I want a six-pack. Okay, come on. I want you to meet my friend Michael. Okay, you're going to talk about getting a six-pack. What you're going to do is a six-pack, and a potato chip is not a vegetable. Oops, I don't want to give it away. So, the biggest limitation, though, all right, the number one limitation I see with my kids coming in is they don't have any strength. Okay? They are not ready. Okay? Here's my equation. It works. Okay? We try to chase, we got little Marios coming in our weight room. Now from a mentality standpoint, they're like, they've already done like their warp whistle, they're like level 10. I'm like, no, we got to start basic here. They're like Super Nintendo. I'm like, no, we're regular Nintendo. We're trying to get the little mushroom, okay? Just to get them a little bit stronger, okay? Focusing on simple stuff. This is this is a problem that I think we're dealing with, is that everybody wants that star power, right? Everybody wants to find that. We're chasing that down when really all you need is that little mushroom, okay? You just need to make a little bump on them, okay? And I don't know why we're doing that, why we're trying to give them so much too soon. Another thing I'd like to talk about with you guys outside. So I got my personnel down, okay? I figured out their limitations. Now I need to understand basketball. These are just, I like video, but I really like these still shots. Because these were taken within the last 3 seasons, and the physicality of the game I think you can see it. The athleticism of the game. Nothing makes my blood boil more than people knocking women's basketball. Okay? So if you really want to get me going, start talking about women's hoops in a negative way, because they are athletes. And it is starting to get above the rim if that's what gets you going. But it is a really good game. It is a great game of basketball to watch. And you need to know, what do you guys see in these photos from a training standpoint? You see triple extension. You see single leg landing, deceleration, acceleration. You see, there's contact. It's body to body in there. It's very physical, and it's getting more and more physical every year. So these are my training guidelines. I try to keep it as simple as possible at the beginning, and then as they get a little bit more mushroom in them, mushroom after mushroom, then they start getting a little more complex. We start adding a little bit of star power. I want a quality application of stress. I think this is one thing, and I don't know how you guys track your readiness scores or whatnot, but you hear a lot of people talk about stress like it's a bad thing at times. But I don't totally agree with that, and I think that one thing that we need to talk about instead is why stress is such a good thing for these guys, and how you can use it in training. Efficiency is important to me. I want quality movements. We talk about injury and injury prevention. Good biomechanics is probably going to help your kids avoid a lot of injuries. So if you can teach them how to be efficient movers, and you can make sure that what you're seeing in the weight room is quality, I think you're gonna have a lot of success with what you're doing training-wise. Progressive overload, it's simple, right? Simple to complex. Same thing with loading principles. Making sure that they can handle what you're giving them and not being afraid to push it a little bit. In transfer training, we talk about understanding the sport. I want to make sure that what I'm doing training-wise is going to help them become better basketball players. Again, all of our kids are, their goal, 9 out of 10 of them, is to become professional basketball players. None of them say they want to compete in Tokyo in the weightlifting competition. I have never had a kid tell me that. They all want to go to Tokyo to play in the 2020 Olympics, so on the basketball court. But I got to make sure what I'm doing helps them become a better basketball player, and always checking that throughout the season and making sure that that's my number one, is helping them become better basketball athletes. And the last thing is I want to be consistent with them. I want to be persistent with them. I want to be improvement driven, and my number one is I want to be positive with them. I want to make sure that when they come in the weight room, that weight room is a sacred space for them, okay? That even if they have a bad day in that room, okay, and they don't train as well as they could have that day, that they know that when they come back, it's still going to be the best experience that they could get. That's my number one. I never want them leaving that weight room with a bad taste in their mouth. I want them leaving that weight room maybe with a taste in their mouth like, man, I could have done a little bit better. I want to do better, But I want that experience to be very positive. All right, so this is my comprehensive list of things that don't develop the mushroom, okay? Feel free if you want to take a picture of this slide. I spent a lot of time looking at these things, but all the fluff, you see a lot of fluff. It's not going to get you where you need to go. I think a lot of this too might be social media driven, so we'll just go ahead and address them. Instagram and Twitter have never won a game. 0 games won. Okay? So maybe spend less time on those things and more time on some things that are going to help you develop that thing. We'll talk about that in a minute. Magic beans. This is we battle this with millennials. They want the easy fix. Because why not? They've always had instant access to everything on their phone. They've had iPads now since they were like 8. They've always been able to get stuff quickly, okay? thing, quality takes time, okay? Magic beans, there are no magic beans in the weight room, okay? Regardless of whoever's Instagram story you're watching or whatever tweet you see, it's not going to help you get stronger. These things will. So this slide is by program. It just depends on where that athlete falls on the continuum, okay? So when you talk about movement screen or movement intake, day ones, when you get them in the weight room, I want to expose them to all of these things. And you're going to see all of these things throughout the year on a daily basis, okay, and what we're doing. Whether it be a warm-up, whether it be a warm-up for a lift, a warm-up for practice, whether it be the lift, okay, or whether it be a session I'm doing with the kid on the side and a return to play. You're going to see layers of all these things. So one is a squat pattern, all right? That's going to be an important feature in what we're doing. A hinging pattern, okay? And guys, you got to teach these things, okay? You need to teach them how to do these things. We're going to do upper extremity pushes and pulls, okay? We're going to carry things. We're going to crawl on the ground. We're going to roll on the ground, and we're going to learn how to brace. Okay, those are important. And the last two, triple flexion and triple extension. Okay. We talk about landing mechanics. That's a big portion of our training before we even get into actually getting off the ground. I want to make sure they land. So that's my program. So if you guys came for the program, that's it. You can take a picture of that, or else I can send you the slide, or you can just write it down. That's it. But where do we decide where they go? So again, a tenet of our program is progression. Okay? I need to understand that progression is the process of developing or moving gradually towards a more advanced state. I really like that. That's what we're doing as strength and conditioning coaches. That's what we're doing on a daily basis, okay, a yearly basis, and that's what we're doing from an exercise standpoint. Making sure that when I introduce that squat pattern, okay, that I want to make sure I'm developing it and moving it to a more advanced state. Does that make sense? Okay, simple. But also a tenet of my program is regression. And you're like, whoa, what? Regression? Yeah, we're going to progress things, and at times we're going to regress them. We're going to pull back. Again, it all goes back to that application of stress. So an example, okay? How to work, I got these 6'3", they're all limbs walking through the weight room door, 6'3", weigh about 165 pounds, never trained before. Go ahead, do a push-up. How many of you guys have had your kids do a push-up on day one? Just fail? I mean, you work with basketball athletes. It's a challenging movement for them for a lot of different reasons. So we got to figure out why. Here's a simple progression that you can use. One, can they even do a plank? Okay, that's going to be important. If you can't do a plank, you probably can't do a push-up. And once you develop the strength to do a plank, let's move them up a little bit. Let's progress them a little bit. Let's try to do an eccentric push-up. And we're going to lift them up. Let's do it on an incline. Okay? They've conquered that. Let's move them on. We'll do an eccentric push-up from the floor. Okay, they conquered that. All right, let's now assist them up a little bit. So, pull them up with a band. You can use whatever you want to use. Okay? Now let's just try a push-up. And I don't know how long this is going to take. It's very dependent on your athlete. It's very dependent on how much time they put in. There's a lot of different things that go into it. And finally, the most, weighted push-up. Let's challenge it a little bit, add a little bit of load. All right? And then finally, the most important one to some people in this industry is you have to have an Instagram story-worthy push-up variation, right? That's important. No, I just put that on there for a laugh, but if you guys want, sometimes it's fun. So that's simple, right? And you guys can do that for any of these movements, correct? Start simple, okay? Teach them the pattern, all right? Let's slow it down, get them some control, okay? Let's add a little bit of load. All right, now we're doing something. We're moving in the right direction. Yeah. Good? Time? Okay. So we're wrapping up a little bit. We're going to talk about the schedule. Oh, let me get there. The schedule that we're dealing with in basketball. So we have an opportunity to have a lot of time with these guys. Summer training, 8 to 10 weeks, 5 exposures a week. Let's just say you're getting 50 exposures. Again, think about your freshmen. That's a lot of good time you can spend with these guys, all right? So make sure you're taking advantage of that. You know, fall training, again, with the freshmen. It's going to be 6 weeks, 5 to 6 exposures a week, 30 to 36 exposures, all right? So you're almost up to seeing these guys. You're in the 80s, okay? With the amount of time you've seen them from June until the middle of October. Non-conference training. I would encourage you guys with your freshmen to try to spend more time with them in this part of the season. I think it's an important time you can develop them. I think sometimes it gets lost. And non-conference training would be the months of November and December. And then conference and tournament training, you know, another 10 to 15 weeks. That's a lot of time for a freshman, okay? How I like to do it is I usually keep my freshmen separate from the group their entire freshman year, because they're in a different place in a lot of these exercises than, you know, their teammates who have been there for 2 or 3 years. So this is, you know, perfect world, right? This is what we see, what we talk to coach about, when we lay out all of our periodization. This is perfect world, you know? But this is real world. So this was last June, okay? We took a foreign tour to Japan to play the national team at the end of June. So we left on the 23rd, okay? So just to give you an idea about how to interpret this, the green days were their pure off days in June, okay? So no basketball, no training. So the 17th and the 18th were their true off days. The pink days are basketball days. Okay, now this is June. Okay, pink days are basketball days. So when you do a foreign tour, you get 10 practices, no time limit. Okay, and you can also do your 2 hours a week court workouts. So you have the potential to have a lot of basketball like we did. The white days were just training days. Okay, so no basketball, just training. Now on the pink days leading up to the 23rd, we also had some training sessions that piggyback with basketball. But so, you know, you can look at this and you can map out your perfect world, but know that in the basketball world, a potential for this to happen will. So you got to be willing to adapt and change your schedule and work with these guys and understand the game again and be ready and prepare for that. Last year, when we had the round table with Jeremy and Amanda, I spoke about my fears about going through this foreign tour, and it was really hard. But if you guys have a foreign tour coming up with your teams, I'd love to share my experience and some things that we did on the front end, and then some things that we had to do on the back end to help our team get ready for the season. So, kind of wrapping up a little bit, my goal for these guys, you know, we talk about it a lot within the program, is you want to be a dream merchant. You know, their dream when they come to South Carolina is to win a national championship. And, you know, one thing that we try to instill in them is that it takes a lot of work. And most things, you know, that are worthwhile like that make you feel that way, it's going to take a lot of work. So it's on the other side of hard work. So you got to put it in. And as coach, I love this quote, is you have to have the patience. You know, you have to stick with it. You know, we talk about 8 out of 20 transfers are transferring. You know, I know some of them, you know, they had some really good reasons, but some of them just couldn't stick with it. But if you do stick with it, and you do put the work in, and you do start simple, and day by day you come in and try to get a little bit better at it, maybe by the end of that summer you will be able to do some push-ups. Or maybe by the end of your career, you will be able to hold a trophy up over your head and say that you're a national championship. So I hope that you guys, when you go back and work with your teams this summer, and I know, because I know strength coaches, and I know how you guys are, that you guys understand that. But I hope that you guys can convey that to your team. Because there's a lot of great things, but just being able to be a part of a group of people and accomplish that is really special. So what else? Is anybody, right now we'll leave it open. How much time do we have? 10 minutes. Okay, if you guys have any questions, here's my contact information. Megan Young told me not to put my phone number up there. She's my trusty advisor, but I still put it up there, okay? So feel free. I'm better at texting. If you call me and I don't have your number in my phone, I usually don't answer, and then I don't check my voicemail for I check it once a month. So I'm better at texting. That's my email address. I check that probably once or twice a day. I stopped tweeting, so don't at me because I won't get it. Don't send me a direct message, I won't get it. Apologies if I haven't been retweeting or liking your things on Twitter. And then that's my Instagram. I don't post much training stuff. I do post a lot of pictures of my really cute dog. So if you guys are into Australian Shepherds, shout out to Scott Caulfield. Please feel free to follow me. I usually follow you back unless you have a bunch of X's and I's in your name. So that's it. I appreciate you guys, and I hope that you guys have a great conference. And does anybody have any questions? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's what you're going to have to figure out with your athlete. If you think a PVC pipe, you're talking just a body weight, like front squat or overhead squat. It could be. So you want to talk about squatting? How to progress it? Yeah. Yeah, we usually start with body weight, but even a progression for us for a squat, we get them on the ground. We rock them a lot, roll them, because the squat is such it's very interesting, right? A lot of them can't squat because of some mobility issues. So we try to address those first, and then try to integrate it into that movement pattern. So it's a little bit more complicated, but a PVC pipe, I think, is a great place to start. That's where you want to start. Right. It just depends on if you see some other things that you might be able to address before you get into that. Does that help? Yeah. Maybe? Okay. What's up, Glenn? Yeah. Separate. I treat them like freshmen because you never know what you're going to get. And even if the kid can fill it up, oh man, she was a 20-point scorer, you get a lot of hype. That doesn't really matter from a weight room standpoint. And what's going to happen with that athlete is you're going to end up spending a lot of time with them anyways, just because they can't play in games. They usually don't travel. So I treat them as freshmen. I put them on a really basic program too. And it's been pretty surprising at how bad the shape they come in. But I think part of that isn't because that they've been in a program before that doesn't train. It's that they take the time. They don't do anything usually. They decide they're going to transfer and they just sit. And then all of a sudden you get them 2 months later. So yeah, I keep them separate. Anybody else? Oh God. Probably not. Probably not. Anybody else? Oh, yeah. Yeah. I think one thing that needs to happen is that strength coaches need to get in the room with basketball coaches and talk about what's going on in the summer. Number one, I think that there's too much basketball being played before basketball season starts. And you know basketball coaches, they're more, go, go, go. God bless them, that's what makes them great. But from our world, it's not helping. And from a conditioning standpoint, I mean, I see Abby sitting there. We had a lot of conversations about this last year after this conference. I don't put a lot of running in front of our girls in the summer because of that. And that foreign tour, it really messed with some things in July, August, and September that we had to kind of clean up in terms of some things that were popping up that you usually don't see in the summer. But because they were basically in season for the entire month of June, we started seeing those things. So we had to pull back a lot on some of our conditioning protocols that we would typically be doing in September, but just didn't feel right, with what was going on the other end of things. So I'd be careful with how much you put on them in those months from a running standpoint, just because they are going to be seen a lot on the court. And knowing basketball coaches, it's not going to be a subtle progression into what they're going to want to see. But no problem. Anybody else? Good? All right. Appreciate y'all.